6 of the 8 are dead. One sat undiscovered in his apartment for a week. This is what nobody tells you about the cast of Lost in Space. They were the first family launched into space on American television. A father, a mother, 4 kids, a pilot, a robot, and one scheming stowaway who almost got written off after episode 1. 60 years later, most of this cast is gone, and how they left tells a very different story than the one you grew up watching. Let's go through all 8, starting with the mother who just became the last one to leave us. June Lockhart. She just became the very last living parent of the Robinson family to leave us, at exactly 100 years old. She was 40 when the show premiered. Daughter of Oscar-winning actor Gene Lockhart, she made her stage debut at 8, won a Tony in 1948, and had already spent 6 seasons on Lassie before Lost in Space called. Here's what most fans never knew. Acting wasn't her real passion. Her daughter later said journalism, politics, and science lit her up, and she was especially proud the show had inspired real NASA astronauts, who reminded her of it on visits to the space agency. She died October 23, 2025, at home in Santa Monica, with her daughter and granddaughter at her side. A family friend said she read the New York Times and LA Times every single day, right up until the end. She was 100 years old. Guy Williams, Professor John Robinson. The family's steady commander had the loneliest true story this cast ever produced. Already famous as Disney's Zorro, Guy Williams stood 6 feet 3 inches, and co-star Bill Mumy nicknamed him the Comb because he groomed his hair between nearly every take. After the show, he grew increasingly private and relocated to Buenos Aires, where Zorro had made him a genuine national icon. Decades after American audiences moved on, Argentine fans treated him less like a retired actor and more like a returning hero. He lived quietly, largely retired, seeing almost no one. He was last seen alive on April 30th, 1989. Neighbors began noticing a smell days later. Police entered his apartment and found him dead of a brain aneurysm. He had been gone for nearly a week before anyone realized. He was 65. His ashes were scattered in the Pacific off Malibu. It took fan petitions more than a decade to finally earn him a posthumous star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Jonathan Harris. The voice that made him famous wasn't the voice he was born with. Born Jonathan Cherasuchin in the Bronx in 1914, Harris hated his own accent growing up. He studied British newsreels as a boy and taught himself an entirely invented upper-crust English lilt. Dr. Smith was written as a disposable villain meant to be killed off in Season 1. Harris turned every line into theater until the writers built the whole show around him instead. One acting student of his was a young Chuck Norris, who credited Harris with correcting his diction, literally sticking fingers down Norris's throat. In November 2002, Harris was preparing to reprise Dr. Smith one final time for a TV movie meant to give the character real closure. An undetected blood clot reached his heart first. He died November 3, 2002, 3 days before his 88th birthday. The project was canceled before a single scene was filmed. Marta Kristen, Judy Robinson. The composed eldest daughter survived something no script could have invented. Born in Oslo in 1945, Kristen was what history calls a war child, daughter of a Finnish mother and a German soldier father killed in the final chaos of the Lapland War. Fearing what that lineage would mean for her daughter, her mother gave her up. She spent her earliest years in a Norwegian orphanage before an American couple adopted her in 1949. She was nearly cast as the lead in Lolita. Her adoptive parents refused to let her take the role, and it went to Sue Lyon instead, whose life afterward proved just as hard as Kristen's parents had feared. Today, at 81, she still occasionally acts and coaches young performers. Mark Goddard. He spent nearly 6 decades of real friendship with the boy he once protected on screen. Goddard worried for years the show had typecast him permanently, a label he fought against most of his career, building decades of steady character work instead. Through it all, he stayed close with Bill Mumy. On October 10, 2023, Mark Goddard died in Hingham, Massachusetts, of pulmonary fibrosis at 87. Mumy later revealed the two had spoken by phone on Goddard's 87th birthday just months before. and that their final words to each other were simply, "I love you." Bob May, the robot's body. Millions loved the robot. Almost nobody could tell you his name. Bob May had performed in vaudeville since age 2, before being cast inside the robot suit. A costume so heavy its upper half alone weighed 250 pounds and needed several crew members just to attach before every scene. His short stature was exactly what let him fit inside it all. He gave the robot its comedy, its guitar playing, its panic. Purely through movement, no one could see was human underneath. Bob May died of congestive heart failure on January 18, 2009, in Lancaster, California. He was 69. Dick Tufeld, the robot's voice. The other half of the same character, and he never once appeared on camera. Dick Tufeld trained at Northwestern before becoming one of the busiest announcers in television, working for producer Irwin Allen on multiple shows while spending over 30 years as a daytime ABC announcer. He even voiced the robot again for the 1998 feature film, using the exact same voice fans remembered instantly. He died of heart disease in Los Angeles on January 22, 2012, following a decline after a fall the year before. He was 85. Neither man ever got equal credit for his half of the character the audience loved as one. Bill Mumy, Will Robinson. He's now, by his own admission, more famous for a song about fish heads than for anything he ever did in space. After Lost in Space, Mumy formed a musical duo called Barnes and Barnes, and in 1978 released a novelty song called Fish Heads, which became a cult phenomenon on the Dr. Demento radio show, and remains one of its most requested tracks decades later. He went on to play Lenier across all 5 seasons of Babylon 5, and continues releasing solo albums into his 70s. Angela Cartwright? In 1965, she was quietly starring in 2 of the most beloved productions of the decade, at the exact same time. The same year Lost in Space premiered, Angela Cartwright appeared as Brigida Von Trapp in The Sound of Music. She'd already spent 7 seasons as a regular on The Danny Thomas Show, starting professionally at age 3 opposite Paul Newman. After stepping back from acting, she reinvented herself as a respected photographer and author. She's 73 today and still creating. Mid-roll engagement break. Before we go further, tell me in the comments which member of the Robinson family stayed with you the longest. The professor, the robot, or Dr. Smith? I read every reply and answer as many as I can. Stories like Argentina, Norway, and the Bronx take real research to verify. And subscribing is genuinely what keeps this channel able to keep doing it. The Scattering Recap Montage. The Jupiter 2 launched into television history on September 15, 1965. 60 years later, the family that flew it is scattered between memory and living rooms. Guy Williams rests in the Pacific, decades removed from the country that made him famous twice. Jonathan Harris was laid to rest 3 days before what would have been his 88th birthday, the closure he was chasing left unfinished. Bob May and Dick Tufeld, the 2 men who gave the robot its body and its voice, are both gone, neither ever fully credited with the other's half. Mark Goddard rests in Massachusetts. And June Lockhart, the last living Robinson parent, was laid to rest just months ago, 100 years after she was born. But Bill Mumy is still writing music. Marta Kristen is still coaching young performers, and Angela Cartwright is still behind a camera, 60 years after she first stood in front of one. Danger Will Robinson was only ever meant as a warning. For most of this family, the real danger arrived long after the camera stopped rolling.